Hey, Ciara.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm going to slide this towards you.
Lovely.
There you go. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's the most impressive podcast setup that I've ever been on, I'd say.
Thank you.
Definitely. Very, very high tech.
Yeah, because you're a podcaster too. You've seen the behind the scenes. It's
a learning curve.
Yeah.
It's probably the best way I could put it.
As you said, it's trial and error.
Yeah.
And I think that what I found is that sometimes you'll hit a roadblock and you'll think, oh, do you know, this is...
Why do I bother?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then then you find that your workflow gets a bit slicker. And do you outsource anything?
No, so it was my New Year's resolution last year to start a podcast, and I was being really perfectionist about it, being like, I have to have an amazing graphic, I've got to have like 10 episodes ready to go. And then I came to I think it was New Year's Eve, and I thought, well, this can't be that hard. There's loads and loads of people doing podcasts out there, and it'd be really nice to give people my content in audio format. So I had a little Google, spent about 2 hours trying to figure it out, and I downloaded Podbean and just started recording on my phone and did a few topic episodes and said I'd just release them. So I released my first one on New Year's Eve last year. And then, like you say, it's trial and error, and you learn over time, and I got graphics sorted over time. I haven't figured out a music intro yet, but some people have them, some people don't, so I haven't really kind of spent a lot of time on that yet. But you learn as you go, definitely.
Yeah.
But just starting was like the biggest challenge for me.
That's interesting though that you say that about the music thing, because this equipment I have here, I mean, this thing itself, this is a Rodecaster Pro, and this is like the latest thing in podcasting.
Really?
And I thought to myself, this is basically a podcasting studio in one unit. I don't know if you see it in the camera. You can see it in the camera there.
It's very impressive.
Like, for example, this is completely unnecessary, but watch this. Oh no, hold on. I'll just turn it up a little bit. So, and then it can do
amazing. Oh my, stop.
So
that's your intro right there.
Yeah, exactly. And it does, like, you have like a laughter track as well, and it does all this stuff, and so I can have like music and snippets and it does all this stuff, which is great.
Yeah.
But sometimes just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it.
Very true.
So I listened to this podcast called the Jocko Willink podcast. I think it's called the Jocko. He's a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
And his podcast starts like this: "Good evening," and then he just has a quote from say Musashi or Buddha, gives the quote, and the quote is essentially the outline of what the podcast is going to be about.
Okay.
And and this is the tempo he speaks at. Welcome. Pause. And you're hooked in, because you're so used to people being like, "Hey, welcome to the show," and the music flies in, and today we have, and we're so used to that way of being overwhelmed with information that he changes the pace, and you're like, "What's he going to say next?" No music, no sponsors.
Yeah.
At the end, what he'll do is he'll just say, he sells his own stuff. So he goes, "I have branded T-shirts, mugs. Go to my website," and so that's how he funds his podcast. But it's so authentic, and in fact, it's such a slow pace that it's kind of hard to consume initially.
Yeah,
you're like, "Come on!" But that's what
I'd say it hooks you in, though. It sounds like it.
It does, yeah. And the conversations he has are like so powerful, and he doesn't bother with all of this music. So maybe.
It depends. It depends what you're trying to bring to people. I think sometimes some of the jingles on the podcast I listen to, I actually really like the little tune, and I've often been like to the person, "Where did you find that?" Because I just think it's a nice piece of music. But there's others that integrate it. So Malcolm Gladwell has one called Revisionist History, and I haven't listened to many episodes, but he intersperses music throughout the podcast. And in his most recent book, Talking to Strangers, I listened to it on Audible. And he puts music in throughout it and inserts like real life quotes from people. And listening to it that way is really interesting too, because it's almost like an audio movie, if that makes sense. So it's not so much about the intro song, but he intersperses music in between like big segments of, like let's say talking about a particular topic, and then a bit of music, lighthearted, and then back into it.
A bit like Serial.
Which I haven't listened to, but I've heard a lot about.
The Serial is the podcast Serial is like, as you said, like a movie on a podcast.
Yeah.
But what you have to realize when you're a content producer like you are is, if you want to do it every week, and you don't have loads of money to outsource everything or time, then it's just unrealistic. I would rather have it's like I said to myself at the start of this podcast, no matter what, every Thursday morning this podcast is going to go out, hell or high water. And now I only missed that once in 70 or 80 podcasts. I've missed that once. I had delayed it a day because I was on my 300-hour teacher training.
Yeah.
But I've realised that if I say, and I never edit anything, nothing gets edited out at all. And I have had like family members say to me, Kev, why did you say that on the podcast? It's embarrassing. You shouldn't say that, you know. But I think like this is the reason I think podcasting is so powerful. And again, it depends what you're going for. But what I'm going for is just what's the most authentic way to communicate to as many people as possible, and be represented properly. So, you know, with social media, you have to be careful about how you put things across, because things get misunderstood in text. But with this conversation where we can think of an idea, have an idea, talk about it, look at different angles. I can get your opinion, and that's, I think, the healthiest way to explore ideas and to think. Is
definitely, like, one of the most interesting podcasts I listen to, and some of your listeners might have heard of it, is How to Fail by Elizabeth Day, and it's fantastic. The premise of the podcast, it's really good. The premise of the podcast basically is that she brings on guests who are generally well-known figures, but not like typical like celebrities, you know, it might be authors or journalists or things like that. And they talk about 4 or 5 failures in their life and how they learned from them and how it made them either a better person or it brought them success later on. So it's completely a podcast about failure, but she's also been very open about her own failures. And it really strikes me listening to it, like hearing someone that you think has all their shiz together, for want of a better word, and you hear how they might think that they've messed up throughout their life, and you go, yeah, I have all those insecurities too, and I have all those vulnerabilities as well. And you realise quite quickly that we're all just pretty much the same. Like, we're not the same, but we all go through those kind of similar feelings and emotions. Like you and I were saying about imposter syndrome before we came on, and like, you'd be shocked how many people have that. I would say most people have that, particularly people in higher profile positions. So I think that's what I love about podcasts. You get to understand the human condition a little bit better, depending on the podcast you're listening to, obviously. But the honesty in that one is particularly good, I think. It's really, really nice to listen to.
How to Fail. Elizabeth Day, did you say?
Elizabeth Day, yeah. She has a book as well, which is one of my favourite things that I read this year. It's really good.
D-A-Y?
D-A-Y, yeah. It's just a really interesting way to sort of, you know, the way people get interviewed all the time on podcasts, and it's often about your journey to the top, for want of a better word. I don't mean that in reference to myself, just other, you know, celebrities and things. But there's so many struggles along the way. You know, for every success is probably 20 failures. And we don't hear about those. So I think it was a really interesting idea to put together. It's really good. Really, really good. Yeah,
I say I'm going to put stuff in the show notes, but I never do. So, if you're listening to this, write down at the pen and paper, Elizabeth Day, How to Fail. Yeah, I just realised one thing. I'm going to pause. This is not edited, so just stall it for 1 second. I'll turn the heater off because it's making a noise. That bath is cold. I have a cold bath every day.
Do you?
Yes. Now, it's only what I do is I have a 3-minute cold bath, and I have a little video clip that I listen to while I'm in the cold bath, and I don't get out until that video clip is done. So it's only 3 minutes.
Okay.
But it's
that's a long 3 minutes. Though.
Yeah.
Very long 3 minutes.
How are you with the hot and the cold?
I'm a cold-blooded creature. Warm heart, cold blood. No, I really feel the cold. Yeah, I get chilblains in the cold as well. So like they get.
What are chilblains?
They're like, it's to do with your blood vessel autoregulation, but essentially, when I'm in the cold, my blood vessels constrict to conserve the heat, but it's when the heat's trying to get let back in, let's say when you warm up again, that some of that fluid gets trapped and leaks out. So you get these kind of, it's not a very scientific explanation, apologies from a doctor myself, but you get these kind of swellings basically, and the fluid just doesn't, it kind of leaks out into the surrounding tissue.
And how does it feel? Is it like stinging?
Painful, itchy, mostly itchy, and just kind of not nice to look at. I got them last year, and they've kind of come back a bit this year. So I'm a Nazi about my gloves. Like, I have to have my gloves on. So yeah, they're not great, but yes, I have to be really, really mindful of what I'm wearing when I'm going out in the cold. Just my hands, not my toes. But I actually shared a post about it on my Instagram. If anyone listening has experienced them before and wants some ideas about how to manage them, because when I posted about it, people were like, oh my God, I have those too, and I didn't know what they were, or I had no idea how to manage them. And even just having a simple chat with your GP could be a really great way to just get some tips and not suffer in silence, you know, because they're a small thing, but like They're really intensely itchy sometimes.
Because I've had them in my toe tips.
Yeah.
Can you say toe tips?
You can say
fingertips. Why not say toe
fingertips,
tips?
toe tips. Yeah, I mean, I won't correct you.
But when you get something like that, you start Googling, and then you start getting scared. You're like, oh, I've got gangrene or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I've definitely had them in my toes. And actually, the heat and the cold. Because my girlfriend Rachel was writing about this lately about the benefits of cold therapy for panic attacks.
Okay.
So, and it sounds like counterintuitive, like, you know, if you want to relax, you get into a hot bath. But now we started doing cold baths, and I feel so much calmer. I don't experience panic attacks, but I feel way calmer. Is there any, have you explored that, whether it's like heat treatment or cold treatment? Have you explored anything like that before?
I haven't, I'll be honest. No. It's not something I've had. Really, I've heard a lot about it, about people doing, you know, cold water therapy or doing a cold shower in the morning, but I haven't really looked into it myself, so I'll be honest. Like, it's one thing that I'm really strict about on my Instagram is like, if there's something I have either not had time to read into or just I haven't had time yet. You know, so many health topics now and so many health trends, and to be like able to debunk every single one would probably be a full-time job, to be honest. So I'm very careful about what, like, I won't go on and do a post about something unless I've had the time to go back into something and you know, take a dive into what the research says. I think that's really important. Like, there's so many healthcare professionals online now, and many of whom I follow and I think share amazing content, and I learn from them too. But as one, I just think you have to be so careful. And the more you know, like any healthcare professional listening will know this, like the more you know, the more you don't know. The more you start to read into something, the more you're like, oh wow, okay, so it's not just this like niche area, like there's interconnections to many other aspects of health. Like, you know, health isn't a one size fits all, and often reading into one thing leads you down another rabbit hole, you know, so you can really, I think you have to be really careful in terms of what you're sharing and be responsible about that, because there's a lot of irresponsible information that is shared out there, and it's hard. Like you say, Googling, like not Googling your symptoms is something that we're all told to do, and yet it's the most tempting thing to do, because like your empty Google search engine box is a minefield of information. You know, you can get the answer to anything at any time now, which is kind of a scary age to be in, really. Because how do you discern, if you're not, let's say, from a scientific background, how do you discern what's fact or fiction just based on a Google search? It's tricky.
What I really like is the Game Changers. I won't talk about this in detail, but the Game Changers movie was out recently. This is a movie about the health benefits of a plant-based diet. And then Joe Rogan, who's like my hero, and he's the hero for a lot of men, to be honest, because maybe a lot of people, but he's anyway. Joe Rogan is like my hero. Has this podcast, and he brings on the guy who made the Game Changers and this guy called Chris Kresser, I believe his name is, who's like who believes that you need meat essentially in your diet, and had them debate. And I thought this was so great, because you're looking at two people who are experts in their area doing a live debate, and you don't get a chance to see that often, really. You
don't. No, I haven't. I don't listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. I've listened to one episode with Matthew Walker about sleep. Because I think Matthew Walker is great. I think his book was fantastic. I also haven't watched Game Changers documentary. I don't plan to.
Okay.
Being honest, but I've heard a lot about it. Actually, I was in Prague the week that my social media feed exploded with posts about it. And I think my take home on it is Netflix is not a source of credible information about health, about nutrition. It is a movie and a show streaming service. So it's not a degree. It's not necessarily evidence-based. There might be evidence that informs the making of, whether it's about nutrition, whether it's about, there's loads and loads of documentaries on Netflix. And it's not that some of the messages in it aren't valid about the importance of, let's say, having lots of fruit and veg in your diet and plant-based foods. That is really important. But I think when someone watches a documentary and then assumes himself to be an expert or shares loads about it, or I watch this and therefore this is what you should do, that's really dangerous. You know, I think that's a really, really important thing for people to remember. Like, a friend of mine is a dietitian and she shares some really great stuff on Instagram, but like, she put up recently this post, like a list of people who aren't diet experts, one of whom was Netflix, but one of whom was also doctors. Like, I'm a doctor, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist. Like, I'm very careful about what kind of, I suppose, nutrition related information I share, and there's dietitians I follow who I learn from all the time, and I would look to them to see, like, what were your thoughts on that documentary? You know, what did you think about the evidence that was presented, whether it's, Game Changers or others, there've been plenty, like What the Health or that kind of thing. Because the danger is that someone watches a documentary and assumes an expert opinion based on that, or that's the only way, the only way forward, the only way to think. I think it's great to get people debating that kind of topic. It is really important. But you have to be very careful, like in terms of what you take from one documentary. And I think that's the danger with, as I said, so much health and nutrition information online is from someone who's not from a scientific background, which just to be honest is the majority of the population. There's a very small number that go into, let's say, science or even nutrition. Beyond that, how do they know what's fact or fiction? It's something that I think about a lot. And that's not me bashing Joe Rogan's podcast or anything like that.
Oh no.
It's just I think it's a point to make that people need to be careful about documentaries and things like that, to what they take from it beyond it being just a documentary.
But people get very protective about their diet. By the way, what is the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist?
Oh, it's so like
in layman's terms.
Yeah, I need to word this very carefully, otherwise I have lots of dietitian friends be very angry. But basically, they're different qualifications. Like a dietitian is a protected title. There's college degrees to support both, I guess, but they're different titles. From as far as I know anyway, a dietitian can, let's say, work in the community setting, but they can also, work in the hospital setting. I would have worked very closely with dietitians during my hospital training. From a nutrition perspective, there are people who are, let's say, registered nutritionists. There's nutritional therapists. I'm probably not the best person to discern between the two, but there are, if people had a look at maybe the British Dietetic Association website is really useful. I'm sure they have a webpage that, differentiates between the two. And then I think there's definitely associations for registered nutritionists as well. I think some of the UK people I follow have done posts kind of breaking down what the difference is between the two. There is definitely differences. But there's plenty online that I suppose are both sharing nutrition information. And I suppose it depends as well. Like your degree is relevant to the information you share, but I suppose what you're doing with that degree is important as well. Like I could be a doctor, but I could be sharing ridiculous false information, Thankfully I'm not, but just because someone has a title, it's also down to what kind of content they're sharing and where that evidence is coming from too.
What do you think are because sometimes we take for granted the knowledge we have in our head. So what I'm getting at is, when I was growing up, my mum would say, stop eating that shit. You're eating crap, basically. And I'll be like, oh, Mum, I want another hamburger, whatever. And she knew, because she comes from a farm, that to eat what grows out of the ground, eat what you make yourself. And she knew that already. So although I didn't take that advice when I was younger, that does implant in your head, no pun intended, and you eventually start to realise, oh, this is real food, this isn't real food, as it were, in terms of good nutrition. Well, what do you think are or do you see to be maybe misunderstandings about what a healthy diet is?
I think something that contributes to misunderstanding, because there is so much, I suppose, misunderstanding about what constitutes a healthy diet. I was at an event a few months ago and someone put up their hand and said, if I have no dietary intolerances, I'm very healthy and well, no issues with any food at all, no symptoms when I eat particular things, what do I eat? And I sat there and thought, how has it gotten to a point in the 21st century where we have people who don't know that, and not that I think that speaks to how information is being communicated by us as health professionals as well, and I think I've forgotten what your question was. Basically, it was how
misunderstandings about diet.
Yeah, I think something's contributed so much is social media. There were always dietary fads and trends, prior to the advent of what they call Web 2.0, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and things like that. But it was through magazines, let's say. So I remember buying magazines as a teenager, and you'd see whichever celebrity, God knows, let's say the Spice Girls, or I don't know, it probably wasn't the Spice Girls, but what I eat in a day, or this is what this celebrity does, all the kind of fad diets of, let's say, the 1990s when I was growing up, or the early 2000s. But now we've got social media where someone could go online and say, I tried this, it worked for me, this is maybe something you should try as well. And that might not be backed by evidence. It might not be safe for that person to try. They might have health conditions, or they might have, I suppose, a suboptimal relationship with food, and they maybe shouldn't try, excluding things. And I think the narrative for so long has been, this is what we should cut out. Don't eat that. That's bad food. It's bad for you. And there's a moral, I suppose, implication inherent in that. Eat that bad food. You are what you eat, being a classic example. If you eat a chocolate bar, you're not chocolate, you're a human being, like at the end of the day. So I think there's a lot of things that have contributed to that misunderstanding, and social media definitely hasn't helped. Like, we know, like, regardless of what, for the majority of them, regardless of what dietary fad has permeated social media over the last, let's say, 5 years, things that people generally agree on are that we should eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And like, our national dietary guidelines in Ireland would say aim for 5 to 7 a day minimum, even up to 10 a day, so even starting with 5 a day, like, that's, if someone was going from, let's say, 1 or 2 a day to 5 a day, like, that's massive. That's a huge benefit. And we know about 37% of the Irish population make that 5 a day, which is something that could be vastly improved on. That's just over a third of people. It's not a huge amount. The other thing we all tend to agree on is that fibre is really, really good for us. Fibre, so things we find in plant foods like chickpeas or lentils or beans, or whatever kind of beans you're eating, fruits and vegetables, wholemeal foods, so like, your brown breads or your oats or other whole grains like quinoa, brown rice, that kind of thing. We know fibre is really important. It's really good for our digestion, for our gut health, which is obviously a really popular topic at the moment. It's also really good for, as far as we know, our cardiometabolic health too. So we all kind of agree fibre is really good. And then other things people agree on are that, like, let's say it's the type of fat that we eat that matters. So eating more unsaturated fats, things that we might get from like olive oil or avocados or nuts or seeds. If we do eat meat, and I know that's another separate issue, and there's ethical, moral and environmental considerations about that, eating meat in moderation has lots of benefits nutritionally. And this is, as I say, in the context of health, not in the context of moral and ethical standpoint or the environment. Choosing lean cuts of meat or eating fish, oily fish, to get omega-3s in. So there's lots of things that, like, I suppose all of these different dietary fads and trends agree on, and they align with what our national dietary guidelines would say. And I think the reason for the misunderstanding probably is just that there's been so many fads and trends, and people get so confused, and all the myths that I suppose permeate as well, which I don't think Netflix helps dispel. So yeah, that's a very long-winded answer, but hopefully that makes sense.
Perfect. That was so good. Well, I think that content producers realise, right, I haven't written anything or talked about anything for a while. I need to think of a subject to talk about. And the next fad is, and then it does this kind of half make up a fad, so that it can maybe get some attention as well. So that, and as you said, anyone can do that now, because anyone can broadcast.
Anyone can do it. Yeah.
Anyone can do that. I mean, and also as well, we don't know, as you said, the background of that person, as in not just academically or professionally, but also what are they like? How is their health really? They may look a certain way, but how's everything working underneath? For example, when I was young, very insecure about how skinny I was, and I haven't actually changed much shape since I've been like 19, but my mind has changed,
Yeah.
But when I was young, I remember I'd go into the gym and be like, I remember one case very, very clearly. I was in the changing room and I was about to go out in my football shirt and my football shorts, whatever, my trainers on, and I walked into the gym, and I walked back out again. It was Raw Gym up in near Camden Street.
Yeah.
Because I looked at my arms and I was like, my arms are so skinny. I'm too self-conscious to actually be in the gym and be like, and actually, funnily enough, the guy next to me in the gym getting changed was Tony something. He was former Mr. Universe.
Wow.
So I'm like, look at me and look at him. And to me, I'm like, I'm not really a man. That's a man, because I was so used to seeing like He-Man when I was younger.
Yeah.
And so therefore I was like, how do I look like these people? I want to look like these men. And I'd be doing loads of research, and this is when the internet was around, but social media wasn't. But I was researching, and they say you got to eat 8 meals a day and look after your macros and this grams of protein per body weight. And I was like, right, I'll do that. And I was constantly eating, and I was like trying to lift heavy weights. Body wasn't changing. And what I didn't realize was these guys are on steroids.
Yeah.
You don't get that. You don't look that way by eating 8 meals a day. And what I remember, one guy, there's a guy called Jay Cutler, and he would say, what I do is I set my alarm for 3 a.m. I wake up, I make a protein shake, have the protein shake, go back to bed, just so I can get my calories in for those 24 hours. I thought that was true. So I can't remember if I actually did that, but I was close. I was really close to it. And then I thought, do you know what? Should I just take steroids? I didn't, because I'm just not that kind of person. But that's what I mean. These people, they look a certain way on the outside. What's happening on the inside? What's their stool like?
Yeah, exactly.
This is the one. It's just a topic people don't want to talk about. Is like, you can tell a lot by your stool.
You can.
Have I gone too far?
No. Poo talk's fine.
Poo talk, yeah. So your stool.
I have to be cool with a lot of things as a doctor, so poo talk ends up being
Of course, yeah.
Order of the day.
And there's a thing called the Bristol. Since we're on this topic,
the Bristol stool chart. Yeah.
There you go. And it's
how do we get here?
This is how it goes. Like it was, 1 is water and 7 is
Seven's
like a sheep.
7's like diarrhea. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, so let's say 7's diarrhea.
Yeah.
1 would be like a sheep's droppings, like little pebbles that are hard to pass.
Yeah.
You want to be about in the middle.
You want to be about in the middle. Yeah, exactly. Right in the middle of your stool chart.
I have no qualifications to talk about this, but my advice would be, just from personal anecdotal advice, would be, what's coming out? Have a look at your stool. Don't just flush it away, and that will tell you a lot about your health. Am I off, Ciara?
No, it's similar to what we say about the urine. Your urine, we talk about dehydration, let's say, for example, like your urine's a really good indicator of how your hydration status is. So we all get obsessed about like getting 2 litres of water a day in, and people buy water bottles that like tell them how much they've had, or like drink up, and you're like, well, maybe if you went to the bathroom and you saw, was your urine kind of a straw colour? And if it is, it kind of should be kind of straw clear colour, light, very light colour. If it's really dark and concentrated and a bit smelly, you're probably dehydrated, And it's really, it's just, I know people don't really like turn around and look at what's in the toilet bowl. How did we get here? But you're right though, trusting your own body to tell you what's going on in that sense is really, really helpful. And yeah, it is to an extent true for your stool as well.
I have never monitored my urine.
Yeah,
as in, I don't mean like test it, but I like never looked at it and gone, oh, that colour or that frequency, or never done that.
Yeah.
And I don't drink much water. I went for a phase when I was about 19. I had severe acne. It was like, I wouldn't even go out because I was so paranoid about my acne. And one thing I read is like, drink loads of water. So, oh yeah, great. Didn't work. Yeah. But I'd go to college and I'd have like these bottles of Evian, just drinking them.
Yeah.
And my acne was still really, really bad. And then I don't drink water at all. And I remember thinking, I don't think I've ever seen my dad drink a glass of water.
Yeah.
He's from the countryside. He's a Mayo. He would drink like 10 cups of tea in a day, but never seen him drink a glass of water.
Yeah.
So how much water do we
I
need,
mean,
or what?
it depends. As with anything. I mean, people get so annoyed because I'm like, just give me that one answer. I'm like, no, because you see, it does depend. Like, it depends what age you are. It depends what gender you are. It depends what activity level you're at. Let's say, like, if you're going to run a marathon and let's say one day and not the next, your hydration is going to be vastly different. Like, there is a nice, from what I can remember on the HSE webpage about hydration, there's a nice little breakdown of how much, let's say, roughly in litres. But like, if everyone kind of aimed for about 2 litres a day, which is kind of 8 glasses of water, like 8 kind of, tall glasses of water, that's probably where we're supposed to. Like, I think a lot of people now are using reusable water bottles, which is brilliant for the environment. But also, if you know that, like, let's say it's about 500 or 600 mils, then you should probably get through about 4 of them a day. But if you're going to go to the gym and run the treadmill for half an hour or go for a run, you're going to expend liquid through sweat, so you have to make that back up as well, so maybe adding in an extra 300, 500 mils. Like, again, I'm not a hydration expert, but, I suppose being having that rough benchmark of about 2 litres a day. But it's hard. I mean, like, for example, like, my nan is very elderly, and trying to get her to drink 2 litres of water a day, it's not going to work. So if we can get her to have, a few glasses in the day, and she has tea as well, then that's great. But like, she's very elderly, and I suppose her hydration status is really important, but also
hydration status.
It is really important. Her hydration is really important. But her hydration, I should say, is really important. But like, getting her to do that, on top of taking her tablets and eating regular meals, that's really hard, so you have to, it's a balance, and it depends, as always with anything. But like, just if you're an adult and you're capable of looking after yourself, and you are able to turn around and have a look at how the pee looks, that's a very reasonable thing to do as well.
Look at your pee, look at your poo.
Yeah, basically.
That is it. And treat it seriously. Speaking of water, and I'll finish on this with the water topic. That is, I bought a distillation machine.
Okay.
And it will distill the water, and you look at what's left in the distillation machine, and it is like brown gunk. It's crazy, and it smells so bad. So you realise what's coming out in tap water, all these heavy metals. And then what I do is I add a little bit of sea salt to it to drink, and I feel phenomenal. I mean, I think because it takes the salt out as well, it takes all the minerals out, essentially, I'm pretty sure. I've tried reverse osmosis machines. I've tried I've tried Brita filters, every kind of filtering system, and reverse osmosis. Distillation seems to be the best. But have you tried distillation?
Nope.
No. Okay. Maybe if you're lucky, Santa might bring you one for Christmas. Distillation. We'll have it up. Fingers crossed.
I got kick Santa in the backside if he brings me a distillation machine for Christmas. What you said there though about, I think we got onto the number twos when you were talking about comparison in the gym, which I just thought. Number
twos?
You know, the poos.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know how we got to there from the gym, but I think it's a really valid point you made about comparison. And I think that's just something that people should be aware of with social media, is that, like, you know, the way when you used to be able to just buy magazines, or you'd go to the gym, let's say, and see people and go, they look that way or I look this way or whatever, and you'd internalize that comparison. But online, you can do that almost all the time now. You know, social media, if you log in to an app and you're following some influencer, let's say, you know, you're always able to compare, even if you don't think you're consciously doing it. And I think I've listened to kind of different people chat about this on podcasts before. I know you had Joe O'Brien on your podcast before. I'm not sure if you mentioned it. He was on mine chatting about that kind of comparison. It's just something that is really, really important to be mindful of, and does, I think, sometimes make the case for taking breaks from your phone, or just even from social media, you know, because even without realizing it, you might, you know, I've unfollowed people in the past because I just don't feel great about myself when I log on and see all they've achieved or how they look, and I'm maybe having a bit of a bad day in terms of how I feel about myself, and I'm like, no, I don't need to subconsciously compare myself and feel a bit worse, so I'm just gonna have to, and it's nothing to do with their content at all, it's, you know, just how I've got to manage my own mental health. You know, it's just, I thought it was a valid point you made. Just wanted to make that point with it.
Comparison is the killer of joy.
It is thief of joy, absolutely.
The thief of joy, exactly. I want to ask you. About. I know I don't smoke.
Okay.
But I used to smoke. I mean, I've partied a bit in my day. But cigarettes never really appealed to me. I want to ask, because I've seen you mentioned it on your Instagram, your blog as well, about vaping, e-cigarettes. I see this come up a lot. What's the story?
So I suppose the first thing to say is that, like, with the whole e-cigarette debate, what we're not disputing is how harmful, like, regular tobacco smoking is, and I think it is really important that people remember that is, you know, it's just one of the most harmful things that people can do. You know, that they're just really awful products that we're basically allowed to be marketed for so long, and there is probably about 17% of the Irish population now currently smoke, which is on a downward trend, which is brilliant. Like, it's been going down from kind of about 22%, I think, a couple of years ago. So that's great. So we do want people to stop smoking. And I think the debate around e-cigarettes is, I suppose, one side is, you know, there's an argument for the fact that a lot of people are using them to cease tobacco smoking, which is great because they're devices that don't contain tobacco, they don't contain the tar. They're essentially electronic devices that heat a liquid into a vapor that can be inhaled, aka vaping. And that's what an e-cigarette is, basically. And there's lots of different types of them. They've gone through different iterations of what they look like. Some of them have nicotine, some of them don't. And they have flavorings as well. Like, there's these crazy number of flavors that you can get, like bubblegum and cinnamon and vanilla and all this. And I've never smoked or tried one, I should say that as well. So there's an argument to be made that if someone is using one and they are completely off the regular cigarettes, that is great, and that is an improvement, and they're probably less harmful in that context. But there's also concerns, I guess, that they're only on the market since the late 2000s. So we don't have, late mid 2000s, I think. So we don't have long-term data. This is what, 2019, nearly 2020. So we don't have that long-term data that we would like to have to know if you started using an e-cigarette let's say 2 years ago, in 30 years, will that have an effect on your body? We just don't know. So I guess that's why there's kind of, when people say there's controversy around them, that's why, because we can say that, like, to an extent, they're probably less harmful than regular cigarettes, but in the long term, we don't know what those effects are. And some of the emerging evidence that we have, which, you know, we don't have a lot of it, would suggest that they may have some adverse effects, but we don't know. Like, for example, in the US, there's an ongoing, a lot of people might have seen headlines about an ongoing vaping associated lung disease outbreak.
Really?
Yeah. There's been, like, I think over 1,000 cases of this particular pulmonary disease, and a number of deaths as well across several states. Yeah, people have a look at, if they type in outbreak of vaping related disease, the CDC in the US, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, have a really nice summary of it, and they've got web pages for healthcare professionals and non-healthcare professionals. But, you know, and it seems to be in kind of a particular group of the population who use a particular type of, let's say, e-cigarette or e-liquid, and the compounds in it, I think possibly it might have been kind of a THC type of compound that they were looking at. So it might just be that one batch or something. We're not sure yet. But I guess that kind of makes the case for the fact that we just don't know, you know, and there's differences also in regulation in the US and in Ireland and the UK around e-cigarettes. And I think that's why they have to come with a word of caution. And there's also people who shouldn't use them, which obviously would be children, adolescents, anyone who's never smoked at all. There's no, like, people shouldn't just take up vaping. Pregnant women, for example, they shouldn't be having the nicotine. So that's the concern. And another additional concern, the last one I mention, is, you know, if young people start using them. For example, in the US, studies have shown an increasing trend of adolescents in high school using vapes, like about 21%, I think, at most recent estimates, which is a lot, you know, for people in their late teenage years who've never smoked before, because it's trendy.
And they're flavoured as well, which appeals to kids.
Exactly. So, and then, but also the concern there is that if you are using a vape, there is concern among public health professionals that you're gonna end up, it may be a gateway to traditional smoking. I just realised, actually, we didn't open this podcast with me telling people my own personal qualifications to chat, but I am obviously a medical doctor, so. And I work in public health. Just in case, I didn't know if you're doing an intro or not.
I do an intro separately.
Oh, grand, perfect, that's fine. I am qualified to talk about this. But that is the concern among public health, that I suppose, or it's one of them, you know, just so people know.
That was great.
This girl just walked in off the street.
Yeah. As you said, we don't know the long-term effects. It's like we're drinking alcohol for thousands of years, but we don't know how long we've been doing ecstasy for. Not that we do ecstasy, but how long have we done ecstasy? You know,
how long has it been around?
Hasn't been around, exactly. Yeah. So we don't know the long-term effects of that, or or vaping, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Speaking of long-term effects, and kids and adolescents. Vaccinations.
Oh,
I said the V word.
You said it.
Now because yes, I mean, I would like. Maybe I'll be a father one day. Who knows?
Who knows?
And this could be something to think about. Like my whole theory is, like, if I had kids, I know this sounds nuts, but I wouldn't take them to school. I would educate them. I wouldn't do the traditional route.
Okay.
All right. Now, I haven't thought about this fully.
Yeah.
So just these are ideas floating around in my head. But how could I educate my child in a way that isn't typical? I'll even send them to a certain type of school where I forget what the name of these schools are. There's one up in the Libertines.
Okay.
It's a special type of school. It's a bit like a Montessori, where they just encourage them to think a different way.
Interesting. Okay.
And that ties into vaccines as well, because so many people now have allergies, and I think kids are being kept indoors too much and essentially being made to be quite weak. So I'm wondering, what is the story with vaccines?
So vaccines, like, there's no other way to put this. They are one of the greatest inventions of modern medicine ever. Like, honestly, after clean water and sanitation, they're one of the advances in healthcare that have made the biggest difference to save lives worldwide. Like, honestly, I know they're a controversial topic, and there's a lot of debate around them, but really there shouldn't be. Like, I mean, they really are one of the greatest advances that we have. Like, the thing about it is, with vaccination, there's this concept now called vaccine hesitancy. And I'm not going to dive into that too much, but it's defined as, it's a relatively new idea, but okay, let me give a bit of context to this. There are, let's say, subgroups of the population who completely accept vaccines, I being one of them, obviously, and I promote them as I should as a doctor. And I would, advocate, let's say, people getting the vaccines in certain stages of life. So childhood vaccinations, we have a childhood vaccination schedule in Ireland. Let's say certain groups of population should get the flu vaccine every year. I posted about that recently. There's certain vaccines that are recommended during pregnancy that are very safe during pregnancy. Then there's obviously the other end of the spectrum where there's an anti-vaccination movement, which is helped in no small part by social media and the ability to disseminate information online, a lot of which is false. And then somewhere in the middle, you've got people who are just confused, the same as nutrition. People are confused about what one end is saying and the other. And somewhere in the middle, the WHO have recently defined this kind of concept of vaccine hesitancy, that there's people who, let's say, delay the acceptance of, or they refuse certain, maybe not all, vaccinations, despite them being available, let's say. So, for example, you might know that your local GP will provide all the vaccines that your child needs from birth to, let's say, 4 to 5 years of age. We have a schedule that sets out different vaccinations, different conditions. But you might be unsure about some of those. You might delay getting them, and there's certain, let's say, time frames they're recommended. And there's 3 factors that people say contribute, and I think they're useful to kind of explain why there's a bit of uncertainty among people around it. So one is confidence. So whether you feel confident yourself from what you've read or what you've heard, maybe that might be anecdotes from friends, might be family members, or you might have confidence in your own healthcare provider who says, no, they're very safe and you should do it. And then you've got trust in them and you might do it for that reason. Then there's basically it's confidence, complacency and convenience, just so I don't forget them. But convenience being how available are they? So is your GP located 20 miles away if you're maybe in rural Ireland, or are they up the road? Like my own GP lives like just literally about 2 minutes drive away, so it's easy to get to. And if I was a parent, it would be easy to bring my child there. Are they available? Is there a shortage maybe of vaccines? And then finally, complacency. And I think complacency is one of the most important. So because of how successful vaccinations have been, and largely they have been accepted by the majority, we've seen a massive decline in vaccine preventable diseases, these VPDs we call them. So things like measles, mumps, rubella, polio. Like there's so many examples because of how successful vaccinations have been. And the issue then being that vaccines become almost a victim of their own success. Because if you don't see the disease, how do you know what it's like? How do you know how it feels? Anyone who's had the flu, and I haven't had the flu, but anyone who's had the flu will tell you, I do not want that ever again. Like it takes them out of things for a week. They can't get out of bed, massive fever, feel crap. And the next year they'll be the first one to get the flu vaccine. Because of how successful, let's say, certain vaccines like the measles vaccine has been, the MMR vaccine, many parents might not have first hand experience of, let's say, their child having measles because they're protected against it. So if you don't know what something is like, you're not really going to fear it, are you? And you might get complacent, therefore, and think, well, maybe they'll just naturally be able to beat it. It doesn't mean they should experience that condition in the first place, So there's always going to be, I suppose, rejection of certain aspects of healthcare. Like in nutrition, there's plenty of things we agree on in terms of healthy ways to eat, but there's plenty of people who will reject kind of the evidence-based stuff. There's always going to be factions against science. But the danger with vaccines is that because of, I suppose, the modern world and how information can be disseminated online, a simple Google search might convince you to not vaccinate when actually, that isn't the right thing to do. And people are very much entitled to make their own decisions about their own healthcare and their children. I don't have children, but it's really, really important to get information from a trusted, credible source. Like if people have concerns about particular vaccines, go to your GP and just have a chat and just say, look, these are my concerns. I've read this. What do you think? And particularly if it's a healthcare provider that you trust, that's a really powerful conversation. And even having that conversation with healthcare providers has been shown in the literature to be a powerful determinant of, let's say, parents getting their children vaccinated. And a lot of the concern stems from the Andrew Wakefield scandal from the late 1990s. He published a case series of studies claiming that there was a link between the MMR vaccine and the development of autism or bowel disease in children.
That's where that comes from.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the fears came from. And some of that is down to how the media portrayed that. He called a press conference that day, and it was very unusual. And it was published in a very high profile medical journal, the Lancet. That paper's been retracted. Dr. Wakefield's no longer practicing medicine. He was struck off for what he did. And there's absolutely no evidence from not decades, but from years and years of research since. That was the late 1990s. There's a really good, not expose, I don't want to use that word, but there's a really good delineation of the MMR controversy, thank you, by a journalist called Brian Deere, and it's freely available in a couple of articles in the British Medical Journal if people are listening and want to have a read of that. It's a long read, but it is worthwhile, and I think it just... he was one of the journalists who kind of exposed the whole scandal and the kind of the controversy. It's just a really useful thing to go have a read of, because it's easy to, a quick Google search doesn't always give you the answer that you should have. You could Google symptoms of the common cold and be convinced that you won't make it to the next day. You have to be really careful. So hopefully that delineates just, I think, the some of the issues around vaccination. I think complacency.
What does delineate mean? Sorry,
kind of explains lines out.
Thank you, because that's my new word for the day.
It's great, isn't it?
I'll be like, Rach, can you delineate me a cup of coffee? What? You completely use that out of context.
Don't know if that's the right context, yeah.
Damn it.
But I think I really think just the complacency is one of the biggest issues, yeah. It's something that, as a person, so I'm specialising in public health, and it is really hard to see some of the false information online. And it's a hard topic to post about on social media too, because invariably there are a lot of anti-vaccination accounts online, and there are some high-profile people around the world, more so in the US, that would oppose vaccination. And I'm not saying people aren't entitled to be agents of their own free will. They are. But I don't think they're entitled to put other people's lives at risk by spreading misinformation. That's my biggest beef.
This is my opinion. Some people are mad. Just to let you know. Yeah.
And sometimes there's an agenda that you don't know about as well,
Yes.
That really isn't the case for me. I'm not being paid to do anything that I put out online. Yeah,
you're speaking objectively, where some people, something has happened to them and they're like, nah, this is their campaign, as it were. And you're like, where's this coming from? But I want to ask you about sleep, because you mentioned Matthew Walker.
I did. Have you read his book?
I have it on audio tape.
Yeah.
Not audio tape. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
what tech can I wear?
It's like, whoa, tape.
Have one on my smartphone. Because yesterday I went to teach a workshop, and the night before I couldn't sleep. That's how it goes sometimes with me if I have a big event, and I slept maybe 3 hours, and then I travelled all day across the country to get there. I taught the workshop, but the adrenaline was pumping through me. So I felt like I taught a really good workshop. I was full of energy. And then I got home last night, and Alfie was playing up in the middle of the night and stuff. So I slept probably 4.5 hours last night.
Okay.
I did up in total. I feel phenomenal. Now, I probably look about 80 years old, but it's the lighting. But I feel like on top of it, I've had a workout this morning. I've been running, took the dog out, haven't even eaten anything all day. Is the 8 hours thing a myth?
Not a myth. No, it's not a myth. No.
You'll be dead at 40, Kev.
No. One night will not make. On the totality of the evidence that we have, and I'm no sleep expert, I would put my hand up and say that it's something
But you have been to sleep before?
I have been to sleep before.
Okay,
yes.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, therefore I'm an expert, I've eaten food, therefore I'm a dietitian.
Yes.
But yeah, no, so no, it's not a myth. I'm sure somewhere along the way there is a subset of people that can survive on a very small amount of sleep, but that would be such a minority. The majority of people around the world, from what we know, the evidence, 7 to 8 hours seems when adults, I'm speaking right now, seems to be that sweet spot. There's nuances to that, like adolescents, because they're growing and they're changing, tend to need to sleep a bit more. Older people, as you get older, your sleep pattern changes, particularly when you're very elderly, their sleep pattern changes as well.
Need more sleep or less?
It's more I think, it depends obviously, whether a person might have sleep issues like sleep disturbances or a primary sleep disorder.
But love an old nap.
Love an old nap, exactly.
My old man, he's loves a little nap.
Yeah, and
when
it
he was younger,
depends. Like
we wouldn't so much.
Yeah, exactly. It depends really as well. Like on, let's say, whether the person might have dementia as well. Sometimes, you know, they can be a lot more somnolent, a lot more sleepy. They might nap during the day or sleep less well at nighttime. Certain mental health conditions can affect sleep, and the reverse be true. But most people, from a health perspective, seem to need about 7 to 8 hours. Too much or too little, like anything, seems to be what's the issue. But it's a really interesting topic. I mean, for a long time, so as a junior doctor, I'd say I was managing I'd like to say 7. It was probably somewhere between 6 and 7. Just, I suppose, because the days were so busy, it's really hard to switch off. I didn't have great sleep hygiene in that I didn't have a bedtime routine. Didn't really have a wind down. You know, if I was working late, I'd come home, eat dinner, go to bed, you know, and it would be like on the phone in my face, you know, loads of blue light, up, crack it on the next day to get to the gym. And I just didn't really, it wasn't a priority, I suppose. And I was probably too busy to think about making it a priority. And then I read Matthew Walker's book. And as a doctor, like, we learn a bit about sleep, and like we would learn a bit about it. But I think his book, it was such a synthesis of evidence. And once you read it, you really I don't think you can think about sleep differently. It's a dense book, don't get me wrong. God. It's very dense.
Well, if you want a nap, listen to that book.
I read it. I didn't do the Audible, but someone I know who listened to it on Audible said his voice is also very nice to listen to, but it could put you to sleep, definitely. It's very peaceful voice.
Very peaceful. That's a nice way of saying it. It's very peaceful.
It's very peaceful.
It's like Eckhart Tolle. Tolle or Tolle, I don't know. Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
People say his voice is peaceful. I would say it's boring, but you know,
but yeah, it is. It's really important, and I think it's something actually I put on my Instagram last week, just asking people, like, do you have kind of a bedtime routine, or is there stuff you do to wind down? And it was kind of 2/3 no, 1/3 yes.
1/3 yes, saying they have a routine.
2/3 saying they didn't. Now our phones don't help. Like they're I can't say they're addictive, but they're very hard to put away, particularly at nighttime. You know, we all end up flicking, but trying not to do that, and trying to have, like, even in the 60 to 90 minutes before bed, trying to have a few things that you do that just bring you from kind of like the busyness of the day and kind of a stimulated state to just being a little bit more relaxed can help. At least it's definitely improved my sleep. It's something I've really tried to do since I moved from Dublin to Galway in July, started a new job, moved out, and a lot was going on at once. And one of the changes I tried to keep constant was a bedtime routine, and it is helping. Reading also really good.
So what would be like top 5 things for sleep hygiene?
Putting away your phone is probably the number one. Now, I do have my phone in my room because it is my alarm clock, and some people say, oh, get an alarm clock, and I should probably get an old-fashioned alarm clock, but I actually really like using my phone. So I have my phone in my room, but I try not to look at it at least in half an hour before bed. Some people find putting on like Calm or Headspace, some of the, you know, the kind of meditation apps or mindfulness apps. Like I'd use Calm and Play just 10 minutes just to try and, you know, I suppose bring my brain from what I've been thinking about during the day into sort of a more of a sleep mode. Reading I find really helpful. It depends if you like reading or not. But it's been great trying to, like, let's say, read a few pages of a book every night. What are the other ones? Low lighting and having a cool room.
Yeah, cool room's a big one.
Big one, yeah, definitely.
And do you know why? Actually, not know why. So if you have a hot bath at night time, it's not the heat that gets you sleepy. It's when your body cools down.
Exactly.
That's what gets you sleepy.
That's it. Yeah. So that's really helpful. Having a darkened room, obviously.
Yeah. Blackout blinds if you can.
Blackout blinds if you can. Yeah, I know. They're the ideal. And then I suppose other things like trying not to do like really intense exercise right before bed. And maybe trying not to like be eating right before bed, within reason. Obviously, if you're home late and you know that's only when you can eat, obviously eat, you know. But trying to probably not have massive meals right before bedtime, just so like you're not trying to like digesting and feel a bit uncomfortable if you're trying to get to sleep. They'd be kind of the big things. There's lots to chat about different herbs and things like that, but I don't really get into that. I think that the practical things are what most people are could probably benefit from doing first.
Habits.
Cultivating
habits that you can maintain that are realistic as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Because it's very popular for people to do these little videos about what their morning or evening routine is. But if there are things that you can't do when you're on holiday and stuff, you're just not. And if you don't keep it up, you think, oh, I missed one day, I'll miss a whole week, and then it just it spirals out of control.
Yeah, it does.
Speaking of habits, this episode is going to be out in the new year, which is 2020.
There's like, 10 days left? It's crazy. Oh my God.
Yeah, we're recording. So what's the date today? 15th?
Yeah, 15th. Yeah.
So it's 15th December today. This is going to be out in the new year. So happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Welcome to the new decade.
It's a great old Christmas, wasn't it? Eh? What about that New Year's Eve, eh? What would you say is good advice for New Year's? Not necessarily resolutions, but yeah.
I used to have this thing about New Year's resolutions where I just wouldn't set them, because the whole concept, it was like you were trying to fix parts of your life. It was more of a personal thing, to be honest. And then last year I thought, no, if you make them realistic and you make them something that are feasible within your life and something you genuinely want to change and you have a reason and a why for doing it, then I think they're very reasonable. Like starting a podcast for me was a New Year's resolution because it scared me and I knew I could do it. I was just being really, I suppose, self-critical about it, trying to have it absolutely perfect, before. And once I was a bit more realistic about why I wanted to do it and what it would bring me and my listeners, it became a lot easier to make that decision and just go for it. So I think people talk about like goal setting a lot, and there's kind of this SMART acronym, which is, oh my God, I'll have to remember this name, but like the specific,
measurable,
achievable, realistic, and time bound. Exactly. Boom. Yeah. So if you're gonna, I suppose, don't be one of my tips would be not to be general about something. I want to eat healthier, which is a lot of people join the gym in January and then the membership sits there for the year. And I think being really specific about what that change is, like eating healthier could simply mean eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, bringing it up to 7. And I know people will probably roll their eyes and go, that's so basic. But if someone isn't doing that and then they start doing that, that's massive. Like they'll see huge benefits from that, and they'll be small, but they'll be over time. And let's say with exercise, if you try and, I suppose, reflect on what kind you enjoy, because that is actually what you're going to want to go back to, like I'm trying to think of a personal example, but like for a long time I didn't do yoga. And I now kind of do a mix of yoga, strength training and walking. And I absolutely love all 3 of those. And I will miss them if I don't do them. I used to run quite a lot. I don't run as much anymore. Not for any particular reason. I had an injury, which I gave it up for a while. And then I should probably start again. But I haven't felt a want to, so I haven't. Yeah. And I'm not forcing myself. So if you don't enjoy the gym environment, for example, there's plenty you could do at home, in the comfort of your own home. There's loads of YouTube videos now, as long as you're being safe about it. So just try and figure out what it is that you enjoy. Yeah. And having a strong why for any New Year's resolution, I think, is a good one as well.
I think on that was brilliant.
They weren't very specific tips, though.
No, it was good, though. It was good. It doesn't need to be. No, there was no. I mean, because everyone is different, aren't they, in that respect? And people do have different needs. Whoever's listening to this, you do not need to improve. There's no. Forget about self-improvement.
You're enough already.
You're enough already.
Yeah.
This actually happens in the yoga world. And this is taken from Mark Whitwell, but practice and all is coming. This thing of the future, your happiness is depending upon a future that may or may not come. Forget about all that. Do stuff you enjoy. So as you said, in the new year, do you like dancing?
Yeah.
Go start a salsa class, because sometimes you'll see like people who are jogging. I don't jog, I do sprints. Like I said, today I did sprints in the park up and down the football field. But I see sometimes people say, just for example, no disrespect to joggers, but to joggers, they're you see them like they're whacking their heels against the floor and they're grimace on their face and they're like, and it's like, why are you doing this? Maybe they are enjoying it, because sometimes I have like resting arsehole face when I'm in yoga, and I'm actually loving it, but I'm just like, got the stink face on. But don't get out the mind frame of punishing yourself. And
exactly.
What I found has been so beneficial is making social contracts. Say I go, Ciara, January 1st, I'm not going to drink another drop, for example.
Yeah.
And I actually got a notification on my phone. The way Instagram will say, like, this time 3 years ago, this is what happened. 3 years ago, I stopped drinking alcohol.
Okay.
And I said, I had my calendar up on my wall, and I said, from this date, I'm not going to drink alcohol. And I said that to all my family as well. I don't drink alcohol anymore. Not I'm not drinking, I don't drink.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah, huge difference.
Because if you say, I'm not drinking, go on, why not? I say, I don't drink, but okay, something's happened, and I don't want to, kind of upset him or ask any more. So that doesn't mean I haven't drank since, but I'd say I've been drunk twice in the last three years. Yeah. Maybe. And I would never go into a shop now and like look at beer and that as an option, take a beer. Or having food, I never have a drink with food. I just don't do it anymore because I made a social contract. I let people know about it. So you can do that, I think works quite well. Social accountability.
Yeah.
But also, I believe there was Googlers, as in people that work for Google, and they had a thing where where they basically said like, okay, we're going to do like, I don't know, a running or something. And whoever doesn't do it has to give the other person a euro. And it was nothing. And it was that kind of thing. Or what was it? It was something like, oh shit, I'm messing this up now. But it was a case of, if you didn't do it, you had to give money to, it was basically, there was a financial incentive there, but it was nothing. It was like a euro, but it's more so the accountability to each other. So
absolutely.
So I would say, don't say, I may do this, I may do that. Make it public, maybe put it on Instagram or Facebook and let people know from this date, this is what's going to happen. And although you may be that annoying person, maybe track your progress and go 30 days sober. And it doesn't feel anything like it could be like, I ate my greens today.
Yeah.
Whatever it was.
Exactly. And like the other thing I'd say as well is sometimes I've been thinking about this myself a lot recently, but like sometimes the healthy thing to do might be to break a bad habit as opposed to think constantly about setting new ones.
Nice.
Does that make sense? You know, as in, and it might even be to try and change a pattern of thinking, you know, like you say about that kind of punishment mindset, or, you know, like starting a diet in January, which so many people do, and thinking about it that way sometimes just isn't that helpful, you know. And sometimes it might just be breaking a bad habit, like, and that might be, let's say, I'm not saying give up drinking, but it might be to moderate alcohol intake. It might be to quit smoking. So giving up something that isn't serving you, which doesn't have to be something as defined as smoking or alcohol intake, but it might just be a way of thinking about yourself. And as you said, like, you know, you don't, like, people who are listening, you're already enough, but if there's things that you want to do that you think might enrich your life and enhance your life and just might make you feel a bit better, that's totally reasonable. But just try and be a bit specific about it, and don't be afraid to break a bad habit instead of constantly focusing on new ones, you know?
Yeah, that is a brilliant tip. And also you feel differently about yourself as well. Like say the cold bath thing in the morning, I heard this from Tony Robbins, how we have two voices in our head, can do it, can't do it. And essentially you're trying to become, I mean, you are enough already, but be someone you're proud of.
Yeah.
You don't need to improve yourself at all. All right. There's nothing, you are great as you are, but think you're great yourself. But I love that tip about giving something up
it might even be like if you said last year, let's say, I didn't see some of my friends enough.
That's a great one.
You know, then sit there and go, okay, well, how am I going to implement that into my life? How am I going to see people more regularly? Like, I have moved, like I say, to Galway. I've moved out, so I was living with a family. Like, we're a family of 6, so busy house, constant noise, really, really close. And I've gone from that to living with 3 new people who were all strangers to me, who are all lovely people, and I love living with them. But I left my social network in Dublin, and my social network it's not that it's non-existent in Galway. I'm not on my own all the time, but I'm a lot more on my own than I previously was, and I am a bit of an introvert, so I'm very happy in my own company. But I have to force myself to go, no, you need to think about ways to get yourself back out in the world and to find new social contracts and new social networks. So like I joined a yoga class to meet new people, like, so it's every Tuesday, for example. But this year, for 2020, I want to just expand that more, like try and find a book club, try and find a hiking club, and just force myself to do it, because the easy thing to do is to be like, oh, well, I've got all these books that I want to read, or I need to do the stuff for my blog. But like, that stuff's not urgent. And sometimes living your life a bit more is urgent. And, you know, you're like, it sounds so silly that you're not young forever, but like, I don't want to look back when I'm 80 or 90 and go, you know, oh, my 20s, like, you know, I didn't bother, I didn't try and make new friends. I was only in Galway for 2 years, but like 2 years is a long time. And I'm going to feel uncomfortable, like, getting out there, meeting new people. But, you know, breaking a habit of spending more time on my own is something that I really need to do, you know. And I'm saying that's me making social contract now, by the way. So I'm telling you this, I'm telling all your listeners that I need to go make friends. I have loads of friends, and viewers. Oh God. I don't have plenty of friends, but it is, and I make sure to try and catch up with them as much as possible when I'm in Dublin. But it's something I need to be just a bit more out there about in Galway, you know, trying to find new friends. It is hard, like in your late 20s is a time when loads of friendships change and you move different places and new people all the time, but it's something that I need to do. So that's just one of mine personally, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, because we're so much more isolated these days. I'm going to a stag in March. One of my good mates is getting married, and again, a lot of drinking. I'm probably going to have a drink there, but I was like, I could do that, or I could stay in Dublin and like do a podcast, do a workshop, whatever. I thought, no, I have to. You can't be filling up just one cup in your life. You've got to fill up a few cups. And these are lads that I've known all my life, growing up with them, and I've been honoured to be invited to the stag and the wedding. So I should go. I mean, and I want to go. But I'm just saying, sometimes you get in the habit of like, oh, this is great. I'm actually doing a job I really love, and I'm in demand, and so I want to keep this going. I don't want to fall behind. But then what falls behind is your personal life.
100%. And
especially like as you get older, it's important to remember the people that you grew up with, and essentially shaped who you are now.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes you literally can't put a price on that feeling you get when you spend time with people you love, and you walk away with such a smile on your face. Like some of the hardest times for me is like driving back to Galway now after a weekend at home, because I'll have laughed, I'll have spent time with people, I'll have heard how their lives are, and just simple things, like even like catching up with the family this morning before I drove over here, and like something my brother said just made me honestly like laugh my heart out, and I was like, you can't put a price on that.
No,
you really can't. And like it's really important to get your work done. Like that has to happen. And for, I suppose, multi-hyphen methods like ourselves, when you do things on the side as well as what you do day to day, it's very easy to be like, oh, well, I need to spend that hour doing up those posts for this week. And I know I'm really bad for that. So I have to make a conscious effort to be like, no, like that'll be there. And if you don't post tomorrow, that's fine. You can post the next day.
Yeah, it's almost like when you work for
like put real life first.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're kind of do a lot of work yourself and have many things. What did you say?
Multi-hyphen method. There's
multi-hyphen method.
There's an author. Is she an author and journalist called Emma Cannon? Emma Cannon. I'm gonna be in trouble with this now. But she's in the UK and she wrote this book called The Multi-Hyphen Method. My friend Vicky recommended to me, but she has a podcast as well. I just can't remember if it's Cannon or Gannon. But that phrase, the fact that you're not just doing one thing. Like I'm a doctor, but I'm also, I suppose, a blogger, a podcaster.
You are? Do you mean you suppose you are?
No, I know, but you know what? Like that sort of.
Come on now.
It's the road less traveled, but it does mean that you have more like, I call it kind of like, when you're on the internet, on Google Chrome or whatever, and you've got all these tabs open, and you're like, you've got about 20, and you're like, I need to close some of these. But you keep opening new ones. So sometimes it feels like all the hyphens that I have to my name, I need to kind of, just remember like there's 3 or 4, and that's what I can achieve. But multi-hyphen method, basically, that your life is kind of doctor / podcaster / health writer / educator. I don't know. You could make them up.
And you're blessed, and I am too, with a lot of go-toers, like get starting things, getting it done. Like a lot of people say, I want to start a podcast, and they don't. But so we're lucky in that way. But the downside, although obviously, I know I have my doubts all the time. But you just same. Again, the whole can't thing. You just got to squash that monster that says you can't do things all the time. And dogs barking, and not that monster.
No.
and essentially, but then at the same time, you got to know when to switch off. When it's 9:30 and you're not giving your spouse or your family attention, you're on your phone because you think I can still work. You got to know when to be your own boss in that respect. Ciara, that was amazing.
Thank you for having me.
To sum it up, watch your pee, watch your poo.
Eat your fibre, eat your greens.
And you are enough.
And also, sorry, I should caveat, if there's dietitians or nutritionists or nutritional therapists listening, and I haven't delineated that. No, I haven't delineated the difference very well.
That word again.
More than happy to hear a comment or, that kind of way. Pop that in there. Hopefully I haven't not insulted anyone by explaining that. Thank you for having me. That was a pleasure.
Thank you,
really
Ciara.
enjoyed it.
You. That was great.